There's a weird pathology in marketing departments. They believe that it's their job to save it. They really do. That's their contribution. It's like these guys went off and they did the best that they could do. And now they've made this thing that chances are nobody wants to see, because it's not smart if you're the head of a marketing department at a major studio to look at a movie and go, that fucking movie's great, man. You know, if it gets fucked up now, it'll only be me. I'll be the one to blame. You know what I mean? But if you start with that supposition, if that's the thing that you begin your task of marketing a movie with, then everything is it's like covering the downside. It's like, instead of talking about how a movie is different, they cover the downside. It's like the whole system, you know, it's like, we present them with a movie, our cut, and it's got fucking fingerprints on it and fucking hairs in the gate, and the fucking projector stops at one point and the sound's not right. And they sit there and invariably, I've never heard a marketing guy go, fuck, what a great movie. We can't miss with this. They always say, I don't know. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think that it goes around, comes around, and I think, you know, you're starting to see people market movies in a slightly more ambiguous and a slightly more tangential way.
These days, everyone kind of hates M. Night Shyamalan. I kind of get it. I mean, he's brought out some really shit films. Very hit and miss. And even when he hits, you got to take it in a sort of corny, self-contained thing. And even amongst it all kind of be a bit ropey. But gotta give it to him. He always goes for it. Like, his films are always kind of compelling or have a premise that is worth sticking around for at least 90 minutes. But one film that was kind of the start of him starting to get a lot of flack and people turning on him back in the day, The Village, I remember, got a really bad rap. And part of it was the fact that the twist that was integral to the film, which, you know, spoiler alerts, but it's like 20 years old, is the fact that they're actually living in modern times and they're essentially a cult. And, you know, the original founding members of the cult knows the truth, but none of the people that have been born and raised there since have any idea. And they use the menace of these fantastical, bizarre creatures that stalk the borders of the village in the woods as a way of keeping everyone scared from venturing out. Now, the actual premise is proper interesting. Having gone back and watched it years later, I didn't have the same terrible reaction I had when I was a kid and I watched it in the cinema. And I think it was because I know the film it is now, so I can go and watch it just as what it is. And I actually quite liked it, you know. I thought it was pretty good. The storyline's pretty good. The characters and the acting's pretty good and pretty interesting. And it's unconventional and unpredictable to an extent. Like, you don't know really which way it's heading. You don't even realize who's the main character. And I think a big part of what ruined this film and made it impossible for it to win people over pretty much was the marketing. Because the marketing really lent into the creatures on the outskirts of the village. This was a horror film. That's what you were going in for. It was going to be scary. It was Signs, but set in the 19th century with weird Wolfman, Little Red Riding Hood creatures lurking about. And that's what you were getting. And Joaquin Phoenix is all over the posters and all over the trailers. That's the star. And what you actually got was a love story conspiracy where there's no fantasy elements actually existing in the film, and the main character is actually a blind girl who's wandering through the forest like Mr. Magoo, trying to find antibiotics from M. Night Shyamalan, who's working as a ranger, sort of guarding this nature reserve. And it's just not the film you were promised. And there's something about that when you go into a film and not only don't you like the film that you get, but there's this weird insult you feel. You feel like you've been conned intentionally. You feel like they've pulled the rug from underneath you, you know. In any other industry, pretty much, other than entertainment industries, you would not be allowed to do that because it's just straight up false advertising. You know, you're advertising a holiday in the Maldives on an all-inclusive and you get there and it's, oh, well, the twist is it's actually not all-inclusive. You got to pay for everything. They go bankrupt, they get sued into oblivion, people would be going mad. But in movies, there's this weird subjective thing where you're kind of allowed to do that. Now, I'm sure there'd be a limit if you completely filmed a bunch of footage that never was even in the film and told a totally different story. That would just be blatant. But there's this weird line in between where it's nearly important to misdirect the audience a little bit. You're nearly supposed to just give enough for them to fill in the gaps. How a film's set up and marketed can completely doom it if it's not what the viewer's expecting.
Well, number one, Declan, people don't like being tricked. As you said, that's the same with anything in life. You go to a mechanic and they say to you, you know what, I've done your MOT, gone over this, I need to charge you £300. Then you go to another mechanic and they said, oh, hang on, you didn't need that in the first place. You're going to get pissed off.
Or even worse, if you try and buy maybe some weed from someone on the street and it turns out to be broccoli.
Yeah, that would be really annoying.
That happened to someone we knew. That'd be very embarrassing.
but also very amusing.
Very funny for everyone else that's there, but very embarrassing and annoying for the person.
The thing I got to say about M. Night Shyamalan is I think it's a good example to use, Declan. He is a guy that has kind of built a lot of his career on those little tricks. You know, we had the whole thing in Sixth Sense. I see dead people. Oh, guess what? Bruce Willis was dead or whatever, you know. That's his modus operandi. Before I see a release, I purposely make an effort, Declan, not to look too much into the marketing. I'm quite a big fan of like posters and stuff. You know, I find movie posters as a art form very iconic anyway, so any new films that are coming out, I'll look at it.
You get a sense of the spirit of what they're going for.
Yeah, 100%. But marketing to a certain extent doesn't have that much of an impact on me, because I try my best not to read reviews. I try my best not to read too much about what the film's about, because I like going into the films with an open mind. And I don't think I ever actually saw The Village in the cinema, because we was pretty young, wasn't we, 20 years ago, 14. So I saw it on home release, so I didn't see all the hype around it. So, you know, I didn't have that background of being tricked. And I agree with you. I think it's a good film, like, personally. But sometimes the presses for films will become viral and you can't help but seeing it. You know, Wicked. So obviously you've got the British lady and Ariana Grande.
Oh, is she English, that chick?
She's English, yeah. They're sitting in press conferences and they're talking about the film, and the press conferences go away from the film and it's going into this absolute nonsense where they're both sitting next to each other, grasping hands like this. Ariana Grande and the co-star going, we're just holding space so well. Like literally just staring into each other's eyes. And it was...
What does holding space mean?
You're asking the wrong person.
What does it seem like they do?
It means like...
Getting on?
Yeah, they're giving each other the space and the time to express themselves, like, and they keep turning to each other like, the way you're answering this question, you're holding space so well for me. And all this rubbish. And the press conferences were so sickly, Declan, and so disgraceful. And
how were you seeing all this? I didn't see any of this shit.
Mate, it went super viral. It was literally everywhere. Like, if you go on Instagram...
But the thing is, you know, like everyone's... I know certain things go bigger than others, but your algorithm is your algorithm.
Yeah, I understand that.
Like, it obviously realised, oh, this guy gets really pissed off at videos of this shit, so keep throwing at him, because I can picture you there scrolling for ages,
I was getting
mad.
Annoyed. Yeah, and literally it became one of those viral sensations where people would do reels imitating them. So it'd be like a guy in a wig like, you're holding space so well. And I say I don't let it get to me, but seeing those press conferences wow me up so much, I refuse to watch the film.
You think it hurt the film's box office?
I don't think it did, because...
No, because it's like the most successful
musical no, it didn't. And, you know, like, I'm not a big fan of Wicked and musicals anyway, so maybe I wouldn't have even watched it without that, you know. And the reviews are very good. Like,
yeah, I gotta be honest, my girlfriend went to see it and she was... You know when you come back from a film and you're nearly like high afterwards? Like, she was putting on the soundtrack and singing in the kitchen while she was cooking. And I'm not a big musical guy at all. There's certain films I love. I go to musicals because I take Soph for Christmas or a birthday and stuff. Yeah. And we seen Wicked. And to be honest, like, as they go, it was pretty good. You know, the songs were pretty catchy. The acting was good. And just from a nerd point of view, I look at all the technical stuff and how they're changing the sets around. I find it kind of interesting seeing it in person. But, I mean, really, you're not a good person to ask for this, because you're the kind of person that would hate this anyway. We should show Sophie that video and then ask her opinion of, like, does this annoy you or put you off the film at all?
Yeah, maybe.
Because she's the intended audience, so it's like you're primed to not like any horseshit they put out around marketing this film in general. What about film you did want to go see or you would have enjoyed, and the marketing either made you miss it because it looked like a totally different film, or couldn't deliver for what the trailer promised, and it primed you for a different experience than you got, and so you didn't enjoy it?
Downsizing. They're normal human beings living normal lives, but then a company comes along and says, we can downsize you to be miniature, the size of an insect, essentially, Declan. And, we have built this whole world for the people that we've downsized, and your 50,000 that you have right now, you'll basically be multi-millionaires in the world of downsizing. Imagine if someone came up to you and was like, do you want to be the size of an insect? I'd probably be like, nah. I don't really want to do that.
Unless you're making insects the size of insects compared to me, then.
Yeah. On the surface level of watching that trailer, I was kind of like, do you know what? This is a bit of a genius concept. But when I watched the whole film, it really wasn't fun at all, and it was just incredibly boring.
It's a weird one because it totally fits what we're talking about, but in a different way. Because, like you said, the trailer promises that premise, and then you start watching the film, and it delivers for a while. Because you do have Matt Damon, he was in the trailer, he shows up in the film, okay, tick one. He does shrink, okay, tick two. And then the film just sort of forgets the premise, and it just becomes a normal film where everyone's miniature and everything around them's made to size. So perspective wise, it's just a normal film with normal sized people and relatively normal sized buildings and stuff. And it's like the film just forgets its interesting premise and just becomes a generic, boring film. And it's hilarious because usually when you have a high concept premise film, if anything, they try and rush the build up to try and just get to the fun bit, but they don't do the work, and that harms the later half because they haven't earned it. Whereas that film, it did all the work and then just walked away. It's not like the marketing team didn't get the premise. They did market the premise well. But how do you market something that starts off with a premise and then just walks away from it halfway through? I actually don't blame the marketing team there. It was kind of impossible for them. It was the filmmakers fucked that up. I'll tell you a TV series example. So I love The Walking Dead, especially the first 3 or 4 seasons, top tier shit. And I'm a zombie junkie, so I love the shit zombie stuff. I watch all the spin-offs of Walking Dead, and I'm stuck with a few seasons of Fear the Walking Dead. Now, a lot of people say like the first season or 2 was as good as the early Walking Dead. I think it was always season 6, 7 level. Like I never thought it was that good, but I stuck with it for a few seasons. But the first time I was watching it, I ducked out after the 4 episodes because I was so annoyed, because we all know Walking Dead borrows from Day of the Triffids because he wakes up weeks into the zombie apocalypse. It's already unfolded, which was cool and probably saved budget. And it's, it's how the comic books happened. But what's the funnest bit of a zombie apocalypse? The unfolding of it as it all starts to kick off. Normal life, people going to their jobs, watching shitty TV, through to the first little, what's going on over there? That's weird. Is that person sick? To, oh shit, people are running around eating each other, to eventually, holding up somewhere. There's not many survivors and everyone kind of understands the rules of this new world they're living in. That's always the most fun bit. And you never got that with Walking Dead. Fear of the Walking Dead, the whole idea of it, the whole marketing, the whole push for it was this time you're going to see it step by step as the whole apocalypse unfolds. And it starts that way, it starts and there's no zombies in sight. The first little murmurings you get in the first episode is just random videos that are going viral of someone getting attacked in Mexico, but no one's really noticing except for a few characters because everyone's getting on with normal life. And then the second episode, zombies start to pop up and it starts to get into the city and everyone's like, what the fuck's going on? But most of the first 3 episodes that are like this, it kind of steers away from it. You know that the streets are filling up with zombies outside, but you're just hearing about it as you watch a family hiding out in some gun store. You're always hearing the news in the background, or apparently there's hordes of zombies roaming through the city, but you're just kind of hearing about it. And then after episode 3 or 4, I think, it just fast forwards to basically Walking Dead time, where the apocalypse has taken over, everyone knows the rules, and it's just that. And I remember just sitting there like, all you've done is made a shiter version of Walking Dead, exactly the same, with much shiter characters and writers. What was the point? Like, the whole thing they sold it to me as I was so excited about, they didn't deliver. And they've done now what? There's now 6 spin-offs of The Walking Dead, and still not a single one has properly showed us an outbreak situation. I would happily watch a season where it goes 5 seasons long and it ends as it reaches sort of the point in the zombie apocalypse that The Walking Dead starts with. I love the outbreak shit. 6 spin-offs and none of them have really ever focused on it. It's not the fact that it wasn't as good as The Walking Dead, it's the fact that it fucking cock-teased me. And cock-teased me not just where it jumped forward in time, but also just along the way where it was like, oh, there's loads of zombies outside. It's not like the first season of Walking Dead where they're not sure if it's going to be a hit or not. Walking Dead was one of the biggest shows on the planet. How about some fucking budget and show some zombies, you cunt?
Do you think that situation is because The Walking Dead became so popular, as you said, the studios, was it AMC, off the top of my head, they're sitting there and thinking, wow, we've got a giant on our hands here. Let's just not worry about the content of it. Let's just pump out as much shit as we possibly can, because people like Declan Murphy are going to lap it up regardless. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point, because the historical rule in television is the opposite to films in terms of budgets. When a film is a hit, then double the budget of the next one, quadruple the marketing budget, we've got a hit on our hands. In television, they say, oh, we've got a built-in audience now, so slash everything, gut it, lean into the characters, drop all the ambitious plans we had for the arcs and the story plots in season 2 and 3. Let's just get it down to its bare bones, because people will probably still watch anyway, even if it's not that good anymore. It's interesting as well, because you also see bizarre examples of films that actually completely lie in their trailers. One of the first ever examples was Soldier with Kurt Russell, a film that gets a lot of hate. I actually really like it. The trailer originally made it look like an all-out action film. They even filmed extra shots that didn't exist in the film, of spaceships flying past planets and massive explosions out in space. Pretty much none of the film takes place in space. There's none of those shots. They don't have any context in the film. They don't exist in the film. It's not like stuff that was shot intended to be used and was cut to reduce the running time. It was just pure lying in the trailer to the viewer. This was leaning further into the action scenes that were not really that common, pretty few and far between, pretty much a couple of them stacked towards the end of the film, but they were used heavily in the trailer, and it made it look like it was this all-out action film. And what you really got was this interesting character study that occasionally had a few action scenes in it. And it's a shame, because I always say Kurt Russell never picks a bad script, and the films that didn't do well were good films. That film didn't do great and got shit on by the critics, but it's a good film. I was lucky enough to watch it as a kid in Ireland, staying at my nan and granddad's house. Everyone had gone to bed. I snuck downstairs to watch some TV. Started watching Soldier, knew nothing about it, didn't even see the opening, and I was fucking engaged. I was like, this is the shit. Like, I was really into this storyline, this idea of these future super soldiers getting bred just for the purpose of being soldiers, and then what happens if one lands on a small village and learns about families and relationships and life and friendship and communities that rely on each other, and watching them go through that thing. And it's Kurt Russell, so immediately I was drawn in. And then when I went online afterwards, I was shocked by all this hate this film got, how savaged by critics it got when it was released, how film fans still talk about it like it was just some mess, some dud, some stupidly ill-conceived film that was just thrown together. But I don't think it was. I think it was a really different, thoughtful action film. For the most part, I'm kind of making it sound like Citizen Kane here. It's still kind of dumb, but especially for back then, a more thoughtful character study action film that got completely, almost intentionally mismarketed. Like, there's no, hey, we were trying to misdirect you a little bit. It was just straight up false advertising. Like, they should have been sued for that shit.
Drive. Someone who actually saw the film, a lady called Sarah Deming in Michigan, filed a lawsuit against the studios and basically said, the trailer you marketed to me was misleading. You made it out like this is going to be a swashbuckling action film. And basically the premise of her lawsuit was there was hardly any driving in it.
Yeah, I don't really remember the original trailer. But that is a weird thing where it really isn't an action film. It's nearly an anti-film. There was already not much dialogue, but actually going in with the script had loads more dialogue. And the director and Ryan Gosling, as they were making the film, they were just like, do you know what, it suits it to have less dialogue. So they just kept cutting more and more lines. It's like the autistic person's Godfather. It's no dialogue. It's a creepy, weird guy who the girl likes, and he just starts rampaging and killing people for her. And he's also a kind of a white knight. Oh, I'll protect you and your family, even though I want to fuck you. And your husband's out of jail, but I'll look after him. I mean, America's very litigious. I remember driving through Texas last year, and every billboard was some corny geezer or a woman in a blazer saying, have you fallen or tripped? Did someone fucking take a shit in your backyard? Call 118 now and we'll sue the fuck out of them. You know, it's a very litigious country. In the end, the judge decided the accusation was wholly without basis and motion for disqualification was properly denied. So I'll give you one where it actually really, really worked for the film. It was the marketing for Barbarian. It presented it in the adverts, in the trailers, as a kind of run-of-the-mill modern horror film. More of the A24 variety than like the Blumhouse schlocky variety. but it seemed like a pretty straight, conventional, things go bump in the night, what's going on premise. You know, two people end up in the same Airbnb. Is he creepy? Can she trust him? Is she in danger? And you don't really know anything else about it. And I went in and saw the trailer. I was like, that looks good. That looks my cup of tea. Started watching it and I got exactly what I'd been promised for the opening 30 minutes. Tense, creepy, horror, mystery, what's happening, who can be trusted. That gets weirder and weirder and weirder, but still exactly what you're thinking. The tension's ramping up. There's gonna be a reveal. Something's gonna happen. And then Justin Long's in a Ferrari being obnoxious on his phone.
That's true.
And we watch him being a sort of obnoxious B-list celebrity, slightly Me Too-ish guy as he's going about his self-absorbed, superficial life and the things he values. And it turns out he owns this Airbnb and he goes back there. But the film essentially completely switches gears into a comedy. And then it sort of becomes a horror again, but it's a horror mixed with that comedy. But the first half an hour is pure tension, pure horror. It so pulls the rug from underneath you. I remember people in the cinema looking around at each other because the change in gears was so sudden and being like, was the wrong reel loaded in? Like, what just happened? We were kind of looking at each other, we were like laughing. Like, the scene it switches to instantly changes the tone, but it stays with that scene where he's driving in his car having a nonsensical conversation that doesn't really add to the plot too much for so long. And I think it does that so that it can let you relax and settle into this totally new gear this film's gone into. Now, the marketing did not promise that. We got a totally different film and it made it so much better. It did just a good enough job to be like, this is a classy, well-made film, good production values, the acting's obviously quite good, and there's sort of a weird premise, something creepy's going to happen, but beyond that, you know, some trailers end up showing you basically what's going to happen 50, 60, 70 minutes into the film. This one pretty much showed you 2 minutes. That was it. But it was perfect. Now, in some markets, they actually did release a different trailer that was from Justin Long's perspective, and and to be honest, I'm really glad I never saw this version because it gives away way too much. And the shock of seeing him in the cinema, having no idea it was going to pivot to his subplot, was just one of the most memorable things about the film. Like The Village, people didn't get the film they were promised, but they got something even better. Why did it work there and all these other examples we're given it was awful?
My thing is, we just talked about that Sarah Deming case. Barbarian. It's kind of similar, but I wonder if anyone's been like, hang on, this wasn't what I was promised, but this film's really good. I wonder if Sarah Deming, if she actually liked Drive, would have been like, okay, that wasn't what I expected, but I liked it. So there's no way she would have sued him.
Well, firstly, I guess there's expectations. M. Night Shyamalan, just coming off the back of Signs and before that Unbreakable and The Sixth Sense, massively famous. The Village was probably going to be like his most buzz behind the film. He was at the peak of his popularity. So what goes up must come down, and the higher you go up, the bigger the crash. But also, I don't know, is it the fact that, firstly, the film's good, but I did like The Village. Yeah. But maybe it's the fact that what Barbarian showed you was going to happen, or what the film was kind of going to be like, wasn't not true. It was just there was this whole other dimension to it. Whereas The Village, you know, those scary Red Riding dressed wolfmen things with the fucking spikes coming out of their backs were shown, promised as, ooh, look at this creepy monster thing M. Night Shyamalan's doing. And then they weren't actually monsters, they were the elders in suits, in shitty costumes.
Yeah.
If a film turns out to be more comedy based than you were expecting, you don't necessarily get annoyed at that. But if actual images or plot points or characters or who the film's focusing the most on completely switches, then I guess it's worse. And also there's the age-old fact of when a film's good, your brain starts looking for reasons to justify things that you'd be critical of a bad film for.
I mean, like, if the film's good, I forget what was in the trailer in the first place. I was like, oh, that was fucking brilliant. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, but if I go and watch it and I'm just sitting there thinking, this is a pile of shit, this isn't what the trailer said. In my opinion, it makes a big difference, the final content of the film.
It primes you for it completely. It's kind of like, even like, think about normal life where sometimes, say if you're just, I don't know, your girlfriend or you're someone at your work or something, and you're annoyed at them, or maybe you're a bit tense about a meeting because your boss is really going to promote you, but he's not made that clear, and he's just sent you a random email saying, I need to have a one-on-one chat with you tomorrow at 3. He gives you no other context, and you know you've been working hard and doing a good job, but you've had a bad day, or you've just had that post-lunch energy dump, so you weren't feeling good at the moment you received the email, so it passed through a negative filter, and now it's in your brain, inceptionizing your brain with a negative filter, so every possible branch you go out from there of what could this be about is going to be in a negative direction, so naturally it becomes, well, my boss is going to have a go at me, how dare he? Why is he just writing now? Why is he not telling me what it's going to be about? That was a bit blunt, wasn't it? He's probably annoyed at me. What's he annoyed at me about? I've been working so hard. I've been doing such a good job. The other girls, he's always nice to. He never writes her emails like that a bit. And she doesn't do half a good as job as me. Blah, 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 blah. And it goes round and round and round. And then suddenly you're having little mini arguments while you're taking a shitter in the shower in your head with your boss about whatever this may be about or not. And you obviously always come out on top in these arguments. And the other person's always unreasonable because it's in your own head. But you nearly go in there ready to make the argument happen. And it works probably a bad example because everyone's got that corporate shield. You know, they'll pretend to enjoy people's company that they don't, and they'll bite their lip because you're in a corporate environment and you have to, and you don't want to fucking lose your job. But if it's, say, a friend or a relationship or a family member, you might go in there and actually, without meaning to, consciously instigate the argument because you're so primed for it. It's not The Secret, like where you literally make the universe around you, but you influence a future event to happen in the way your brain believes it's going to be. You don't even realize you're being antagonizing to get an argument going. And I'm waffling all that to say it's so important how you're primed for a film, which is why, and I know you do this as well, these days, I never watch trailers. I'll watch maybe 10 seconds of it just to get a general vibe of a film. I'll watch like 4 seconds of it, that's it. Even then, maybe I won't do that. Maybe I'll just hear, it's starring this person, here's an image from the production while they're shooting it, and it's the premise is this. Oh, and William Dafoe signed on, bang. Yeah. Stuff like that, that's all you need to know. And then you can truly walk in as a completely blank slate. And it's just a completely different experience. Art or whatever, any kind of creation, movie, films, it's a bunch of people working together, but say with an auteur or whatever, as close as you can get where it's one person's vision. It's feelings and things in their brain and ideas and thoughts that he wants to convey, and then he garbles it out in words to random people around him, and they try and interpret it as best they can, but they have their own attachments to those words, so they're going to interpret it differently. But he sends them off, and if they get it slightly wrong, he says, no, cameraman, film it more like this. No, use that sepia tone. Make the lights more like this. Actor, adjust your performance to do this, and he tries to get as close to what his vision is as possible, and then eventually that all forms into one piece of media with sound and video and a screen that you can go watch. Now, it's already, from his original vision, passed through so many people who are going to interpret in their own way, with limitations of technologies and limitations with his own ways to express himself, and it goes through all these things, and then it's in its final forms. You know, it's like you're sailing and you're half a degree off, you'll be 90 degrees off very quickly. I mean, it's probably already nowhere near the beautiful, perfect version of it he had in his head. But then you watch it with an idea of, oh, I don't like that actor, he's a dickhead, or this is going to be a comedy, but it's actually a heartfelt drama with a couple of comedic moments, but that's all they showed you in the trailer. Or you go in with, this director's supposed to be shit, or I didn't actually want to see this film, my girlfriend convinced me to, so I'm already in a bad mood. That again colors your experience of it and your interpretation of it and how you're going to feel about it, because at the end of the day, the feelings is the only thing that really lasts. You forget 99% of what happens in any film after you've watched it, especially if it's a few years away. All that really resonates and stays there forever is the feeling you had. So even if you would have liked the film, the feeling overpowers it, and that's what gets remembered. And it's already so hard for the person with that vision to get it to you in any format close to what he originally conceived. Since I've started not watching any marketing, not watching any trailers, not reading any reviews, not seeing if it's supposed to be shite or terrible or good or Rotten Tomatoes, audience versus critics, all that shit, generally, even when I don't quite love a film, my experience hasn't been that bad. Probably because I'm picking good films to go see, but also because you go in and just get what it is without preconceived expectations.
I think the way that my mind works, I can be very easily convinced or manipulated. Within seconds I'll form an opinion because I'm like that. I'm very impulsive. I know what I'm like. I'll watch like 3 seconds and be like, nah, this is shit, and I'll just form that opinion straight away. And I might have missed a lot of good films from doing that. But I also want to jump to the defense of, like, I'm not slagging trailers off. I think they are still very important, especially like lower budget British films where they don't have the money to market, so you won't see like posters in a train station or something. And I've just generally stumbled across these trailers and been like, do you know what? This looks really good. I'm going to give this a chance, you know? And if we're talking about the more independent stuff, the art of the trailer is still very important.
No, I know what you mean. Like, don't get me wrong. I fucking love movie trailers, especially how good they are these days. Like, it is such an art form, and they've nailed the formula so much that you can see people repeat it. You know, like those parodies where someone makes The Shining a happy family movie,
Yeah.
and they put on do 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 da 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 music instead of the dun dun dun, and they, you know, they put the clips together and they show slow motion in a moment, and the movie theater voice guy is saying, "This summer, Jack Nicholson is the father who loves his son," and they show like a picture of them hugging when it's really that creepy scene where they're sitting on the bed together, and people can just go in and completely make a different story, a different genre out of the same film by manipulating the footage.
Meet Jack Torrance. He's a writer looking for inspiration.
And it makes you wonder, like, how far could that go? Obviously, a trailer can easily do it because it only has to be maybe a minute long, 2 minutes long for a long one, 30 seconds for a short one. Could you make a 30-minute film of a happy Shining before it starts becoming impossible because most of the film is a bit disturbing and weird? You know, if you put in happy music for so many moments, would that make it easier and you get another 10 minutes for... Do you know what I mean? It's just an interesting thought. But what I'm saying is the trailers nowadays are just perfect. Like, I don't know if the model for movie trailers will ever really change from what it is now. It's hard to see. It's nearly like the Great White Shark, where everything else is still evolving and changing in the fossil record, and the Great White Shark's pretty much not changed in 100 million years because it's just nailed it. But it's hilarious. Like, do you ever go and watch old movie trailers? You know, when you catch them on YouTube? Even for the biggest films like Star Wars, I remember seeing the original trailer in America for that film, which was what, 1985, 4? It wasn't that long ago. When you consider the 90s is when they started really getting good at trailers. Honestly, it looks like the first time you downloaded Final Cut. You know, those awful preset filters where it made it like kaleidoscope and stuff. Like, they would just use all these bizarre effects. They wouldn't explain what the film was. They would show clips, but not with audio of dialogue that kind of conveys a bit of the story as quickly as you can, or the premise. It would just have this movie voice guy that would narrate the entire time, and then he'd be like, "Oh, and here are the Ewoks, don't forget them," and it would show the Ewoks waving. It's amazing anyone ever went to go see a film by how bad trailers used to be.
When I was 13 years old, my voice changed in the middle of a sentence. "Mom, I'll help you with the dishes." Literally. And it never went back. And I was this cut up in class. And when I went to school the next day, I didn't want to talk. And the teacher got bugged about it. She said, "Why aren't you saying something?" And I said, "What do you want me to say?" And I was sent to the office because she thought I was screwing with her. And for a while there, it really upset me. But then I discovered that I could be everybody's dad. Jimmy can't come to school today because he's not feeling very well. The words dictate to me how they want to be read. For instance, the 24 script I just read. There's only one way to read that for me. It's automatic with me. I don't even know how I could explain what triggers it because it's been in place inside of me for so long. And that's what you have to bring to voice acting, is to bring their own personal experience, their own personal take on horror or love or drama or comedy or music or whatever. How you feel about that. If you can bring that through your reading, it will give you a unique voice.
It's good that you brought up the deep voice guy. I understand why they have stopped doing it. The world has moved on, but I kind of miss that. Trailers are so refined to the fact that they want to just push this information onto you. But I kind of miss, like, back in the days where you turn on like Channel 5 and it would be like, "This summer, this isn't another teen movie." As you said, it's too refined and manipulative to the exact last frame, and I don't think I like it. I like the previous versions.
See, it'd be interesting if it follows the football shorts principle. Football, soccer, Americans. The football shorts are kind of like the tectonic plates. You can't see it with the human eye because it's too slow, but they're always in fluctuation. They're always changing length, getting longer, longer over years, then shorter, 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 till they're ridiculously short and the balls are hanging out, and then it gets longer again over the period period of like decade cycles. It seems to be like sort of fundamental principle. You just see through the decades, they always get longer and shorter for whatever reason as the fashion changes and cycles back on itself. And I wonder if the movie trailers will be like that, where it will become a time when the whole model that we have now, even already it's starting to feel a bit stereotypical, predictable. Someone's going to say a line early in the trailer and then it'll go, and then it'll cut to a title card or something, and then it'll cut to something else. You know what you're going to get, sort of. I wonder if ever it will cycle back around, kind of like 90s fashions back in. Maybe 90s
vintage
movie voice trailer vintage guy will come back.
I don't see that happening. I see it going a totally another forward direction with like VR and all this stuff now. And what's those Apple
Vision Pro?
Yeah, I feel like it will literally be on the level of people will start getting all that stuff, and people will be watching movie trailers from home using special goggles where people are like walking out in front of you. I feel like it advancing that way rather than back to the vintage. But
what will the technology, how will it actually change it? Because that's basically just watching trailers but with Vision Pro goggles.
I think if it's possible, it might just be a load of garbage that I've made up. Do you ever?
Yeah, sorry, I was generally interested.
No. But no, in answer to your question, I think that's gone definitely. I don't think that's what the public want anymore. If they still wanted it, it would still be here. These movie studio people aren't stupid. They have crack teams of marketers. They know exactly the trends, you know.
So I'm not kind of trying to veer off into AI because, I seem to veer off into AI constantly, and this, even when it's completely nothing to do with the topic, I always find a way to interject it in somehow. And like, I kind of like doing AI to create the images and stuff for the thing, and it annoys people, which I get because it annoys me too, but for whatever reason it's just enjoyable to do. But I was thinking there where will trailers even matter anymore when everything's just automated AI generated movies and studios don't bother ever investing in genuine films, and the only real human made films that will exist anymore, will that be like the hipster thing of collecting records where you actually go see a real made film? But I was thinking in that apocalyptic dystopian Hollywood version of the future where that is the case and everything's just AI generated all the time automatically, it'd be interesting where trailers won't be needed anymore. But let's say they don't want to rely just on you making a film from scratch with Robert De Niro from a prompt. They're still releasing films fully made that they've made AI generated, but it's still going to be like that summer's blockbuster. That's what it's intended to be. They're making a new Godzilla. And they've made it AI generated, and then they start sending out AI trailers based on the film. But they're all slightly different. They range from completely different to completely different on one side with minor adjustments along the way. They release them all over the world, and they instantly start gauging people's reactions to the different versions of the films. And then they calibrate it into the best combination dependent on the market, and then they adjust the film entirely to reflect that, but adjust it again depending on which market they're going into. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense, and you seem genuinely excited about it.
No, well, I'm
Which
fascinated by the notion. I'm horrified at the actual reality.
It sounds like my worst nightmare. They've manipulated it so much just for the fact that they want to make the most money that it's kind of removing freedom of thought. It kind of sounds like some sort of George Orwell type of thing, which I don't really like.
And it's weird because there's always a silver lining in a weird thing. There's always something where something might work out for someone, I guess, because filmmakers would be they'd want to spit in the face of whoever signs off on that. Film fans would probably feel a sort of an innate rejection, the same way you get when you're scrolling through Instagram and you see a beautiful Renaissance painting and you're like, what's that? And then you realize after 20 seconds it's AI generated. You get this repulsive feeling where you reject that. You're like, that's not real. Someone didn't create that. It's this weird thing. It's like the inverse of the feeling you get when you see something, a beautiful piece of art. You're like, that's not real. So film fans would be disgusted, filmmakers would be disgusted, but marketing people and analytics people, they would actually be the most creative people left in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Because they would be getting to at least oversee and direct the AI and scheme and make the final decisions on what this AI marketing trailer mechanism is able to ascertain and the data it pulls in. There's still people that have to look at it and be like, okay, we're actually going to make the decision on this. So weirdly, that future somehow makes the marketing side of it the most bullshit, least creative, dumbest part of it, arguably, the most creative side of it, and the actual filmmaking is the least creative side of it.
Nah.
What a horrendous future.
That's a hard no from me, man.
Oh no, I'm not saying.
I know.
I'm
you're
not saying good.
I
I'm
know
saying,
you're not saying yes, but that would be my worst nightmare.
Why?
Because the filmmakers and the creative people behind the films, and I've always said it, they should always be the one with the most power. Not the big wigs pushing pens and typing on typewriters and looking at budgets. They should be the least powerful, in my opinion, but that's not the way it always works, is it? I remember knowing nothing about Dead Man's Shoes and seeing the trailer of him like going around the town confronting him against the fences because they market it like he's from the army and he's returned and all this, and I was like, you know what, Shane Meadows and Paddy Considine in this is our fucking generation's Get Carter, man. And I was just blown away by it, and I'll always remember that trailer's always stuck with me like this many years later. Do you have
You cunt.
You what are you looking at? You cunts. Like, and I'll never forget that. Is there like a trailer that brings up a similar feeling to you?
Remember as a little kid seeing the trailer for Signs, to kind of bring it back full circle back to M. Night Shyamalan? I remember Signs looked like the best film of all time to me when I was like 9 or 10. Like, I remember just being like, holy shit, does that look scary, fun, cool? Amalgamation of all things I'm interested, like UFOs, fucking Mel Gibson. I don't know, like it just looked I remember just looking at it and being like, I cannot wait to see that film. And 9-year-old, 10-year-old me was not disappointed. I loved it. So we went from shitting on M. Night Shyamalan to giving him some love right at the end there. Bang.
The Shawshank Redemption tanked at the box office. And the reason for that is only real marketing movies get, I think, is word of mouth. You can promote it all you want, but if the first few audiences go there and come back and can't say, I really saw this great film, then you're not going to go very far.